Is it me, or is it unusually slow tonight? My coworker asked. We all looked at each other and agreed. We worked in a very small hospital emergency room, and there were 7 of us that night. 1 doctor, 4 nurses, and 2 ER techs. The hospital had no inpatient wards like an ICU, so no one stayed the overnight. It was just us in the entire hospital. If patients needed to be admitted or have emergency surgery, we had paramedics on standby ready to drive patients about an hour away to a larger hospital system. They usually stayed out in their ambulances sleeping. We had in-house radiology, lab services, and 1 housekeeper which made everything convenient. A janitor would be somewhere in the hospital cleaning and getting the hospital ready for the next day. The clock hit 2 a.m. Fuck, I thought to myself. 5 more hours. It's not that I was tired necessarily. It was more so that there was nothing to do, and that level of boredom, how quiet it was, and my sleeping coworkers made it difficult to stay awake. The housekeeper on tonight was Diwa. Diwa is mute and deaf, and sometimes that communication barrier can make her job difficult. They say she used to speak, but something happened a long time ago in her past, and she stopped. Most of us learned some basic ASL to communicate with her. Things like, hello, how are you, and some work-specific signs. She was so sweet and almost always brought us in food. Tonight she brought in lumpia and chicken noodles. She even made her own homemade sweet chili sauce. She would always make much more than we could eat, but we were so grateful. She was like a mama bear to us. Hello, she signed to me. Hello, I signed back. How are you? Good. She signed with that sweet smile of hers. She took out her notepad and wrote, help? I smiled back and nodded. Diwa often asked us to go down into the basement where the laundry area was with her. I think she liked the company. I can see how it must be hard to work solo every night. I never saw her listening to music, so I couldn't imagine being down there by herself listening to commercial-sized washers and dryers going. Diwa grabbed the bedding storage, and we started rolling it out of the ER and down the hall. The halls would be dark at night, but as we walked down the hallways, each segment would activate the lights with our movement. We had 2 elevators in the hospital, with only 1 going into the basement, and it was on the other end of the building. Diwa motioned me to push solo, and she took out her notepad and wrote, busy. I shook my head no, and made a dozing off face. I wonder if she ever gets offended with any of the facial expressions we make. I motioned for her to push solo, and we traded. I wrote, it's been a struggle staying awake. I'm sure you saw everyone sleeping again. She grinned and nodded. We both were pushing again and arrived at the elevator. On the way down, the lights flickered. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, my heart skips a beat thinking it will get stuck. I couldn't imagine being stuck in an elevator in a building built in the 20s with sleeping coworkers on the other side of the building. I pulled out my cell phone and sure enough, no service. The elevator door opened and we made our way to the laundry area. The elevator opened and you were greeted by an awful looking brick exposure, and you had to turn a corner onto the only hallway that led to the different rooms. The basement had a few different operations. The laundry room, the sterilization room, and an old morgue that hasn't been used in decades. We used to have an operational ICU and surgical suite, but budgets cut apparently, so they shut all that down and now everything gets passed off to the city. The laundry area was the last suite on the right. We passed by the sterilization room, and it reminded me that before I leave for the day, I have to bring down the used equipment from the day's shift. As we were walking by the morgue, I saw something in the corner of my eye that looked red. I briefly paused in our walk and looked, but nothing was there. Diwa made eye contact with me with a concerned expression on her face. What? She signed. I shook my head with a smile and made the crazy sign by rolling my finger at my temple. Her expression was now a mix between concerned and borderline scared. I started to feel guilty for spooking her. We walked into the laundry room. Before she got started with her task, she turned on an old boombox and music started to play. Some pop song filled the room with techno beats and a robot sounds girl singing about her wild party life. I walked over to Diwa and started to help. She grabbed my arm and motioned to me that she didn't want me to help. I nodded and went and sat in a chair. The wave of needing sleep came over me again. I felt myself doze off suddenly and stood up. I motioned for Diwa's notepad and wrote, "Thirsty." She shook her head. "I'm going to go grab a pop from upstairs. I need caffeine." I wrote. Her eyes darted to the doorway of the laundry area and back to me with that borderline scared impression again. She seemed to reluctantly nod. "Are you good?" I wrote. She took a deep breath and nodded. Her bright smile flashed across her face and she motioned for me to go. I smiled back and made my way out of the laundry area. As I made my way down the hallway, I looked into the morgue by putting my hands over my forehead and peering in. I swore I saw something red before, but the room was completely empty. I kept walking down the hall and made it to the elevator. I pushed the button, but the door didn't open right away. A few more seconds passed by. Someone must have used it. Probably the janitor. I waited for what felt like forever, and the doors opened up. A lady in a red dress greeted me with a dazed look. Her hair was unlike most fashion I would expect a woman to have in 2021. It was pulled back into an old-school-looking bun. She had a feather headband on with black flats. Her red lipstick matched the dress. I held the door open expecting her to step out, but she stood there with her eyes to the floor. I don't know why I expected her to step out. There was nothing for her down here. "You looking for the ER?" I asked. She looked up at me with that dazed look. "I think I'm lost." "Yeah," I said. "Looks like it. If you were looking for the ER, I work there so I can take you there. Nothing else is open, I'm afraid." She looked back down to the floor and kept silent. Okay, thought to myself. The elevator started beeping, wanting me to make a decision. I stepped in and hit that L button to get to the main floor. As the elevator started to go up, the lights flickered again, and the elevator stopped. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt my pulse slowly start to rise. "Sorry about this." I managed to say, "Our building is super old, and sometimes this happens." I wasn't sure if I was lying to her or myself to make the situation better. "So, are you looking for the ER or anything specific?" She turned her head and rose her eyes to me. Her head slowly turned back and she looked to the floor again. "My husband is here," she said softly. "Is he in the ER? I was just up there about 20 minutes ago. No one was there," I explained. "Do you know which hospital he went to? Mayo Clinic is about 45 minutes from here. Is he there?" She kept quiet for a bit and then said, "No, he's here." "Got it. Well, you can come with me to the ER and we can take a look. Maybe he got there shortly after I came downstairs. If he isn't there, then I'm afraid you've come to the wrong hospital. There isn't anything else open right now and we don't keep patients overnight." She didn't respond. The elevator still wasn't moving. I started to feel very uncomfortable, partly because of the elevator and partly because of this woman. Something seemed incredibly off about her behavior. The nurse in me started to think she was in the middle of psychosis. Either way, if her husband is here or not, I think Dr. Evans should see her just to make sure nothing is going on with her. The lights shot back on, and a few moments later, the doors opened to the lobby. "The ER is down the halls away. You can follow me there and we can see if your husband's there." I stepped out and began walking and noticed she wasn't following. The doors began to close. I rushed to the doors to stop the doors from closing. A lady looked up to me before they shut, and she was smirking at me. The hairs on my neck stood up. She's fucking with me, I thought. I headed back to the ER and went straight to Dr. Evans. He was slumped over in front of his computer, sleeping. "Hey, Dr. Evans," I said softly. "There's a woman in the building who I think needs to be checked out." He lifted his head up from the desk. "Why? What's up?" he asked. "Either she was fucking with me, or she needs mental help," I explained. He had a puzzled look on his face and shrugged. "Guess I'll have to go looking for her. Why not radio to the janitor and give him a heads up?" "Yeah, definitely," I said. I grabbed the radio from the nurse's station and radioed to the janitor that there was someone in the building walking around. No response, but that was typical. I still needed caffeine, so I went to grab that first before beginning my journey to track down this lady. I grabbed a monster from the vending and noticed no one was walking around. She was going up in the elevator, so I decided I was going to start on the second floor and work my way up. The hospital was so small. It wouldn't take very long. I went to the elevator, hit the button, and noticed it was coming up instead of down, which meant someone had took the elevator downstairs. I doubt it was the janitor. It must have been her. I quickly made my way in and hit B to go down. As I went down, sure enough, the lights flickered again, and I jerked in a circle to look behind me. Someone was there, but nothing was there. I felt goosebumps all over my arms and legs. "Psyching yourself out. Stop. Relax. Why are you tripping over nothing?" The doors opened back up and I quickly turned the corner and made my way to the laundry area. As I walked in, I found Diwa working on the laundry. She greeted me with a smile. I motioned for her notepad. "Did you see anyone down here?" A puzzled look came over her face. She grabbed the notepad and wrote, "Janitor." I shook my head and grabbed the notepad. "Lady, red dress." She glanced at my note for a few moments and shook her head. She immediately turned around and began to take everything out of the dryer. The washing machine was still going. She took the notepad from me and wrote ER. She put everything into her laundry bin and headed for the doorway. I followed her route and we turned into the hallway to find the lady in the red dress standing in the hallway looking into the morgue. Diwa immediately stopped with a horrified expression washed over her face. She grabbed my arm and I could feel her sweaty palms and heavy grip. "Hey," I called out. "Are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" She turned to us and shook her head oddly slow and looked back into the morgue. "I think you should get checked out. Are you on A&E?" I suddenly felt Diwa pulling on my arm. I gave her a confused expression. She lifted her notepad and it said, "Devil." The goosebumps, chills, and hairs on my neck were all back. "What?" I said, my voice shaky. I looked back to the lady in the red dress and she was looking at us with her head turned again. Her expression was no longer dazed, but something closer to blank. I started to hear Diwa whimper. I don't think I've ever heard sounds come from her before. I looked to her and she was frantically signing to me, but I couldn't understand. She then put her hands on the top of her head and a look of desperation came over her face. She began pointing down the hall. She pulled out her necklace containing a cross gripped in her hands. She made the holy cross motion and closed her eyes. I could see her mouthing frantically. Prayers. I looked back to the lady in the red dress who was still peering at us. Her hand went to the handle of the door that led into the morgue. It was locked. "Can you let me in?" she asked. Deewa's hands were gripped back onto my arm, pulling. I turned to her. She began pointing down the hall away from the lady in the red dress. I wasn't giving in to her pulls at first, but then she began violently pulling me towards her. I took a few steps with Deewa down the hallway and looked back as we were turning the corner. She was smirking at me again. Deewa flung the double doorways leading to the loading dock open and ran out into the parking lot. Her breathing was heavy. She was sweaty, and she looked pale even with her brown skin. She wrote on her notepad and aggressively pointed to her note and handed it to me. "Devil," it said. I took a few deep breaths. I pointed toward the ambulance bay to the ER and started walking. Deewa began to follow. We made it back into the ER and everyone was still the way they were before, sleeping. Deewa sat at the nurse's station and rested her head on the desk over her hands. I could still see her jaws moving, probably mouthing prayers again. I pulled myself together, reflecting on the situation, and suddenly Dr. Evans came out of the physician hut and asked, "So, where is she?" Deewa's head shot up from the desk and she quickly stood up and walked into a patient room. I stalled for a moment before saying, "I couldn't find her." Clearly lying. "Have you seen the janitor?" "Nope," he said and went back into the hut. I went into the room where Deewa was. I mouthed, "Are you okay?" She shook her head. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with the cross still gripped in her hands. I motioned for her notepad and she handed it to me. I wrote, "Why is she the devil? How do you know her?" Deewa shook her head. "You don't?" I mouthed. She shook her head again. She took the notepad and again wrote, "Devil." I struggled to know what to ask next. Deewa only ever wrote one word when communicating. I decided to be blunt and wrote, "It's just some crazy woman fucking with us." Deewa looked up at me with a firm stare into my eyes. She shook her head, grabbed the notepad and wrote, "Devil." I gave her a hug. She hugged me back, tight. Felt so bad about the entire situation. Deewa is so scared. I don't know if I've ever seen someone so horrified and scared like that before. We sat there for a while, hugging each other tight. I let go, grabbed the notepad and took a step back. I wrote, "It'll be okay," and showed it to her. She looked up at me as if to say, "I hope you're right." She nodded slowly and laid back on the bed. I wrote on the notepad, "Lay here and rest as long as you want." She nodded again and got up fully on the bed. Her necklace with the cross was gripped back into her hands again. She made the cross sign over her body with her hands, closed her eyes and began mouthing phrases again. I walked out of the room and went to the nurse's station. Everyone was still asleep. I began to pace. I felt anxious. I started to think about the lady in the red dress and those smirks. I started to wonder if I actually saw the smirking or if, in my anxious state and Deewa's panic, my mind made it up. I went into the empty patient room and splashed water on my face from the sink. I looked into the mirror and saw the heavy bags under my eyes. My eyes were bloodshot. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. I began to think about if I should go back down there and confront the lady in the red dress. She needed to leave the hospital. I could threaten to call the cops. Yeah, that's what I'll do. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take the bucket with the items that needed sterilization. I noticed there was a large scalpel. I looked to see if anyone was awake and put it in my scrub pocket that was over my chest, just in case I gotta defend myself. I thought. I took a very large, deep breath. I held it for 4 seconds and released my breath over 8. I have no reason to be scared. It's just some lady fucking with us. I'm going to go down there and tell her to leave. If she doesn't comply, I will call the cops and they can deal with her. I walked down the hallway to the elevator. I stalled for a moment and hit the button. The elevator came up and opened. Empty. I stepped inside and the doors shut behind me. I hit the B button and began the descent. No lights flickered. I hit the bottom and the doors opened. I took a step and peered around the corner. Nothing there. I stepped as lightly as possible towards the corner leading to the hallway where I saw the lady in the red dress. A sudden confidence rose within me. It's just some person who needs medical attention, or is someone who is going to bail once threatened with the police. There are people out there who do shit like this and fuck with people for a rush. I got closer to the corner, paused, and peeked around. The lady in the red dress was faced towards the opposite end of the hallway. I slipped the scalpel under the end of the bin in my right hand. "Hey," I called out. "If you don't need medical attention, you need to leave or we will call the cops." My heart was racing. My palms were sweaty. My fight or flight response was turned all the way up. She stood there without moving or saying anything. The silence was deafening. I could hear my heartbeat. I could hear my breaths. I could hear my internal panic. I took a deep breath and confidently asked, "Do you need medical attention?" She began to slowly shake her head. Suddenly, she began to heel over as if she was laying over something at the waist. Her arms were dangling. She slowly turned towards me. What I saw next made me realize that Diwa was right. Her eyes were white as if rolled back into her head. Her jaw hung open, but it was at least 1 foot open towards the ground. No human's jaw could be open that far down. Her legs looked as if they were cracked backwards. Her arms rose and were reaching back and forth to me. A choking voice, gargling, quietly moaned, "Help me." I was frozen. I felt nothing. I didn't feel there. The bin of equipment dropped to the floor. I didn't hear anything impact the ground. I felt the scalpel in my hand shaking. Was I breathing? The lady in the dress had blood suddenly dripping from her abdomen and onto the floor. "Help," she moaned again. Her intestines slowly collapsed out of her stomach. They were dangling from her. She took a small step towards me. I could hear her legs cracking. I took a step backwards, and another, and another. I had a horrified look on my face. I was looking at the most disturbing thing I have ever seen. My back hit the wall behind me. I was trying to push myself back farther, but I couldn't get any more back. She took another step towards me. The cracks filled the hallway. Blood was spilling out all over the floor around her. Her jaw, her lower fucking jaw was so low. I couldn't see her neck. Her head began to tilt. She began to cough and blood sprayed out. She was gargling on her own blood. Blood still pouring out. I next heard something I could not define or see the source of. It sounded as though something had moved. There was a loud screech. A long tire squeal. All of her internal organs spilt onto the floor. I couldn't move. I was frozen. The only things that were working were my eyes. I don't know if I was breathing. I was seeing something horrifying. It wasn't real. This is a dream. She was moving towards me, cracking bones with every step. She was stumbling from side to side. There was a trail of blood behind her. Crackle, crackle, crackle. She was feet away from me. I was looking into her eyes. They were completely white. I could see all the way into her throat. I could see the blood gargling in her mouth, dripping onto the floor. With each step, I could see her swinging intestines. Crackle, crackle, crackle. She was right in front of me. I felt my vision narrow. I wasn't breathing. My heart was exploding out of the chest. I could only feel my heart. The scalpel was in my hand, trembling. My eyes were deadlocked onto her. I scanned her entire body one last time. Her white eyes, her low open jaw, the gargling blood in her throat, her intestines dragging, the blood pouring out, her bent back, cracked legs. Her eyes and pupils suddenly dropped. She was looking at me with them. The lady in the red dress roared a deafening, demonic, demented roar. Blood spraying across my face. Her breath blowing into me and... Came to, standing in the ER. I was violently shaking. Sweat was dripping from my eyebrows onto the floor. I was hyperventilating and was choked up. My knees were weak. I was crying. My eyes were glued to the bloody scalpel in my hand. It wasn't bloody before. I looked into the ER. No one was in eyesight. With all of my might, I tried to take a step forward and collapsed onto the ground. The scalpel dropped and slid across the floor. I brought myself to a sit against the wall. The nurse's station was directly in front of me. Everyone must still be asleep. How did I get up here? I looked down and in my lap, I was drenched with blood. Was it her blood? Guys, I called out. My throat was so dry. My voice cracked. Guys? Nothing. I managed to bring myself to a standing point. Felt the whoosh of all my blood dropping to my feet. I thought I was going to pass out. I stumbled my way around the nurse's station to see everyone as they were before, slumped over their desks, sleeping. I inched my way to one of my coworkers and shook their shoulder, attempting to wake them. As I did, their head slumped to the side. His throat was cut open. Horrified, I jumped backwards with a gasp. As I looked around, there was blood everywhere. All of them were dead, their throats slashed open. Peeked into the physician's hut and saw his throat was cut open too. Blood poured out all over his chest, lap, and legs. His eyes were open, dead, and looking my way. Dewa came into my mind and I rushed to where she was before. I lost my breath. All sound disappeared. I felt lightheaded. She lay there, her arms spread out to each side hanging off the bed, her throat cut open, the bed soaked in blood. Hanging from her right hand was the necklace with the cross. I took a few steps back. To my left, in the bay, was the janitor laying in a pool of blood, his throat cut open. I looked down to the blood that I was covered in. It was then I realized my hands and arms were covered in blood. I fumbled my way into a patient room that Dewa was in. In a state of shock, I went to the sink, turned on the water, and attempted to wash the blood away. It wasn't coming off. I used soap and scrubbed harder, and still nothing was coming off. I looked at myself in the mirror. Blood was all over my face. Hair had been pulled out. I had scratches, a black eye, a busted lip. Was there a struggle? Suddenly a voice spoke behind me, one I hadn't heard before. How did it feel? It was a woman's voice. I turned to see Dewa sitting up, blood draining from her cut throat. I choked. What? You can talk? She fell back onto the bed. This wasn't real. None of this was real. I slowly turned to exit the patient room and I saw her. The lady in the red dress, but she was back to how she was before. When I first saw her, she was grinning at me. What? I choked. What is happening? Her grin disappeared, and now she was blank in the face. She crossed her arms and keys were dangling from her fingers. I remember, she said. I didn't understand. Remembered what? I managed to say. She was looking dead into my eyes. She stepped forward. I remember when your ambulance hit me, pinned me against that tree. I remember. My husband was driving. He hit me on purpose. He wanted me dead for a long time, at least since 2015. The coward waited until our 10-year anniversary in 22. I still didn't understand. I've never driven an ambulance. In 22? It's only 2021. I was walking home from a party. He knew when I would be leaving. They unpinned me from that tree without any hesitation. My stomach ripped open from the impact, my innards falling out onto the grass. My legs cracked. I choked up, said, didn't do that. I didn't do anything. They brought me to this hospital. He brought me to this hospital, to this very emergency room. Your doctors and nurses, his friends. She's telling me a story that I don't understand. They left me in that bay. You were all watching me die. You stood over me. You did nothing. I shook my head and said, I would have helped you. She rushed towards me, grabbed my throat, pushing me against the wall. You did nothing, she said through gritted teeth. She was looking straight into my eyes. I felt a disturbing presence. Diva was right. The devil. I woke up in the morgue. I wandered these halls for years looking for him. For them. I never found him. I never found the other man driving the ambulance. Those doctors. Those nurses. I never found any of them. She let go of my throat and I fell to the floor. Her standing over me. Your friend. The one in the bed. Felt my throat closing. Diwa. I found her first. Then her friends. They were the first. I watched them from the morgue. I waited for a long time before coming out. I found the strength to open the door and I walked out. Finally able to. I tried to leave the hospital. I did, but I couldn't, so. The hospital is mine now. She's dead. She died a long time ago. This hospital, those employees. How did it feel? She asked. I was violently shaking. I was so weak. Was I dying? I'm scared, I said. So weak, so powerless. I don't know what was going on. I felt scared. I'm scared. I don't understand what's going on. I'm not talking about downstairs, she spat. What? I managed to ask. How did it feel killing all of your friends? She was grinning ear to ear. My eyes went straight to Diwa. I looked out the doorway to the nurse's station, knowing they were all dead. I looked at the blood all over my body. I remembered the way I looked in the mirror with black eyes, scratches, busted lip. I never felt my eyes so wide. What did you do? I remembered. I was rocking in bed, wringing my hands together. I haven't said a single word in 2 years. So when are we going to talk about what happened? The psychiatrist asked. It's been 2 years today and you've never said a word. Trauma does that to people, but if you ever want to move past this, I need you to talk to me. I was rocking. I didn't have thoughts. I heard his words, but they came through a narrow tube. They were meaningless words. I can't think. Just because you murdered them, you still have a right to live, he said. I'm here to help you with that. I want to help you move past that. I said nothing. The psychiatrist sighed. There was a knock at the door. He went to the door and opened it. We need to talk, a voice said. In the middle of a session? He asked quietly. It happened again. The voice whispered. Another mass murder. Hospital. I looked over to the two of them. The psychiatrist looked over to me. He nodded to the other employee and closed the door behind him. He sat down in the chair and we locked eyes. Are you ready to talk? I heard him. I heard both of them. Felt energy. This was the first time I looked at him. He raised his eyebrows with a smile as if to encourage me to speak. I tried to say a word, but it didn't work. Nothing came out. I cleared my throat. I still couldn't talk. Hey, that's the first step, he said, elated. You can do it. I felt anger inside of me that I haven't felt since I was found guilty of 8 counts of murder. So, I reached for his clipboard, took it, and he handed me a pen. I wrote and showed him the note. Hospital, ? Yes, you're in a hospital. I shook my head. I wrote, Grady, ? The hospital you worked at? Where the murders happened? I shook my head again. I took a deep breath. It happened again. The lady in the red dress did it again. This time to someone else. Innocent people. She will keep doing it. The cycle will continue. First Diwa. Who knows who else it happened to, if any. I wrote one final note for the psychiatrist. This was the last time I will communicate with anyone here. I will wait until the pattern is noticed. They will see it. They will make the connection. Once they do, I will be ready. I will leave this place and figure out what happened. I will try and make things right. The psychiatrist took the clipboard and looked at the note. Devil. This will be less of a confession and more of a personal account of something that deeply terrifies me, but calms me in the same sense. If you read what I have to say, you will understand further. I killed my wife in 2016. I strangled her in our own home with my bare hands and buried her 10 feet deep in some secluded woods an hour out of town. I found out she was fucking her old coworker, and rather than risk the biases of divorce court, I held her neck until she died and inherited everything we had. She hates me for it. She never lets me forget it. Even when I think we're having a good night, if we're sharing a plate of spaghetti, her favorite dinner, she'll still bring it up somehow. If I pour her a glass of red wine, she'll say something like, "Remind you of anything, Zachary?" in her calm and soothing voice. One particular moment I can recall was when we laid down for bed on a winter night years ago. The window glass was frosted around the corners, and I was getting a couple of extra blankets together to keep warm. My wife stood in the corner of the bedroom and watched me while I tried to find a specific blanket that was really soft to put under the rest of them. I searched everywhere we would have put a blanket, but it wasn't anywhere to be found. Zachary, that was my favorite blanket. I hope you didn't get it dirty. I had forgotten completely that I wrapped my wife in her favorite blanket when I buried her. In the first days after I killed her, every once in a while I would wake up to the thunderously silent noise of her footsteps around the house, always at 1:12 a.m. When she acted like that, without fail, she would find herself on our back porch, staring off in the direction of the woods. It's cold out there, Zachary. After 4 or 5 nights like this, spending hours out on the porch sitting with her, I decided I needed to go get her. Now she's in the basement, wrapped up in her favorite blanket, laying on the guest bed. After I did that, she got a lot more lively. We held conversation again, whereas before, it seemed like she didn't really want to talk to me at all. I think she began to forgive me when I brought her home. But even when we're talking about any innocuous thing, she'll find some way to remind me of the morning I killed her. I would tell you to hold me, Zachary, but I'm afraid of where your hands might go. I can't watch specific movies with her anymore. If I know there's a scene of strangulation, she gets in a bad mood for the rest of the night and refuses to talk to me. Instead, she just murmurs around the house, turning lights on and standing in one room for a couple minutes without doing anything. Last night when I came home from the town, she was waiting for me on the couch. We talked for hours and she apologized profusely for what she did to me. But when it came time for me to apologize to her, I had to look at her face and remind her that even though I am sorry, I can't undo it anymore. She then got very angry at me and yelled incomprehensible beratement until the inevitable reset at 1:12 a.m. This happens at least once a month. Today, when I got home, I couldn't find her. After 5 years of her walking around my house and nagging me for murdering her, I couldn't believe how I felt. I think I almost forgave her, because I actually missed her and I needed to find her. But after almost an hour of looking around the house, she turned up in the living room again. She was pouring a champagne and had set out a platter of different cheeses. She likes to disappear for a short moment like that. I think to play around with me. How was your day, Zachary? Was traffic a squeeze? She always finds a way to butt some nagging line into a conversation. But today, I still sat down with her. We ate cheese, drank champagne, and watched some nature documentaries. Our favorite ones were always ocean documentaries, especially if there was footage of massive blue whales. She always loved to hear whales singing. I find myself doing more and more of the things that she loves. I think I'm beginning to forgive her finally after these 5 years. I don't think I'm scared anymore. I wish I could go, Zachary. I wish I could visit the whales. I must admit, when I killed my wife, I was terrified. Not terrified that I would be caught, but terrified at the fact that I killed a woman that never truly went away. Some nights when I woke up and saw her standing in the doorway to our bedroom, I was mortified. Eventually, after a couple of nights of this happening, I began trying to talk to this figure of my wife. That is how our marriage survived. I discovered this horrifying darkness in my home was only dark on the exterior. Deeper, it was still my wife, so I could keep it at bay by treating her as my wife. Maybe one day when I'm not so upset at her, when I've forgiven her completely, maybe at some point if my fear of this second marriage has dissolved, and I've grown to miss from the first marriage, maybe one morning, at 1:12 a.m. again, I'll find some way to join my wife, and we could go see the whales together. In my opinion, it's my belief that the forests of the world are the greatest gifts the world has given to us. I mean, trees. They are simply awesome. Without them, we can't breathe. We can't live. But that's only the tiniest tip of the iceberg of how great trees are. I mean, come on. Panda. That's the largest living organism on Earth. A freaking tree. That's not why I'm here. No. You didn't come here to read me, Alicia Valerio, ramble on and on about Earth's diverse plant life, did you? Unless you did, which is highly unlikely. You're here because I experienced something I'll never forget, and even though I've been told not to tell anyway, I have to risk it. It's the only way the truth gets out and nobody is hurt ever again. I remember I was awoken at around 3 in the morning with a loud, rather inconsiderate knock on my door. I stumbled out of bed, confused, half dreaming. Who the hell is knocking on my door at frickin' 3:28 in the morning? I murmured, taking a glance at my clock. Well, my clock showed 3:32, as it was simply off by a few minutes. I looked through my door's peephole to see 2 people in dark suits and very suspicious-looking fedoras. Yes? I spoke as I opened the door. I think you have the wrong house. I'm Alicia Valerio, evolutionary biologist. A woman with ginger hair spoke. That is you, correct? Well, yes, I confirmed. Why? I need you to identify this fruit, spoke another. This time, a man. He pulled out a plastic bag from what looked to be a briefcase. What is it? I cleared my eyes and studied the contents. It was a strange, perfectly spherical, reddish-bluish thing, kind of like an apple except it didn't appear to have a stem, nor any place where a stem would grow. I was puzzled. Some kind of apple? I asked, reaching towards the bag. The man swatted my hand away. Are apples poisonous? Well, actually, there's a type of false apple called solanum that... I looked at their faces, then back at the fruit. Not an apple. Never mind. All right, spoke the woman. You may return to rest. With that, the group began to leave, taking the strange fruit with them. Now I was getting more confused. Why had I answered the door? Who were these people? Probably sleep deprivation, but now, more than anything, I wanted to find out what it was. Hey, I called. You can't just leave me hanging like that. Maybe you could give me more time to study. I noticed the man with the briefcase turn towards the lady and say something my sleep-deprived brain barely registered. Something along, maybe if she conducted an interview, and she'll have to sign the non-disclosure form. Hey, I yelled. I can hear you. Sort of. I'll sign it. Well then, if you're coming with us, we're FBI, the lady explained. I'm Agent Rengage, and I believe we need your help on a very strange situation. The man, who I came to know as Agent Park, handed off the non-disclosure form and I signed it. And so, that's how I found myself sitting in a sleek black car in the middle of the night. I don't remember too much of what Agent Rengage and Park told me in the car, but it was about the case, the one I was supposed to help on. A couple on their honeymoon had found a strange wounded woman staggering down a nearby highway covered in blood. They drove her to the nearest hospital, and soon after, it was revealed that it wasn't her own blood, but it belonged to a nearby church pastor, Audrey Gallant. Within minutes, police showed up at the church to find an entire congregation of people's eyes closed and dead. They were able to revive some who awoke for several seconds before falling into a comatose state. In the center of the church was the pastor, Audrey Gallant, dead. One would expect her body to be hanging from the ceiling, or just plainly laid down. But no, it was none of your standard death positions. She was impaled by a strange tree, albino white, its branches poking through lifeless vessel. They found her in pieces, a branch through the throat, and two more separating two other pieces of her body. The tree's branches, through her body, sprang strange fruit like the ones the agent showed me. I was shown photos and I almost threw up by the sheer bizarreness of the whole scene. Additionally, as if to make things way more confusing for me, the tree's fruits were shoved down all the throats of the members of the church. You most didn't die of suffocation either, being poisoned slowly as their insides turned on themselves, destroying all resemblance of a human inside and turning it to mush. Their bodies quite literally digested themselves until there was nothing but an outer shell of skin remaining. The ones the police were able to revive showed significant progress towards regenerating any injuries, yet they were all still in a comatose state. A strange woman found on the side of a highway seemed to be a nobody, and she hadn't talked to anyone, and neither police nor the FBI agents were able to discover information about her. At last, the vehicle we were in arrived to the parking lot of the police station, the blue-gray building towering over us. I entered the building and soon found myself looking through the one-way glass at a dirty-haired woman that looked tired, confused. She was in the interrogation room, and I would be the interrogator. There she is, Agent Rengage confirmed. She's told us a name while we were out consulting you. She calls herself Carmelia. Interesting, I murmured. As I was led into the interrogation room, I stared at the gray walls, the shining bright light that hurt my eyes, and finally, at the distraught woman that called herself Carmelia. So, I began. Fruits, huh? No answer. You're Carmelia? What a pretty name. I believe you're named after a vampire. Is that correct? Again, no answer. This time, I asked something more pressing. What did you do at the church? Why are you the only conscious survivor? What happened? At this, there was an answer. She began, half whispering. I disobeyed him. Who? I asked. I was making progress. The Lord, she answered, quietly tugging at her hair, cuffs preventing her arms to move fluidly, the essence of life and knowledge incarnate. Jesus, I questioned. No, that may be yours, but the Lord is all things. The very flesh of knowledge, bones of time, it was what binds us all together, to connect our thoughts and make them whole. I vaguely remembered something from Judeo-Christian mythology about the fruit of knowledge used to differentiate evil from good. Is it the fruit? The fruit of the Lord is merely one of many paths towards divine enlightenment, towards the final unity of all things, towards the time in which all flesh and thought will rejoin as one perfect form, where all will be made clear and true. Carmelia murmured. I didn't understand. Did you eat the fruit? Did all of you eat it? Carmelia nodded. You do realize that fruit is extremely toxic, even in low doses. I snapped. What exactly is that, Church? The fruit is flesh, only toxic to those who do not believe. The power of the Lord protects us all, the power of the one who would unite the world. Hey, I said, snap out of it. I need to know what the hell happened. It was like any other day. The woman began. A Friday, a day where we praise him. We began service at 11, nighttime, where the forces of mind are best at work. Audrey, began to recite the services of the truth, she began, and in my mind I assumed that the truth was their version of the gospel. And then it came time to partake upon the flesh of the Lord, and to feast upon the fruit of knowledge, just as usual. Wait, I cut in. Eating the fruit was a regular thing? That's impossible. The power of the thoughtful one will forever shield us from the poisons of knowledge, was the answer. This still did not explain anything. Just... okay. When she bit into her fruit, we began to notice that a feeling of intense happiness was upon us. Waves upon waves of pure goodness. Carmelia remembered. I remember Audrey said, "The Spirit of the Lord is among us. Eat and be pure, for tonight we are united in the web of the mighty." And then we all ate. Next, Audrey began to read from the beginning of the Book of Absolute Truth, and somehow, as we ate the fruit, we began to chant the verses with her, as one mighty flesh, singing the words of our Lord. Do you believe that the spirit of this Lord was there with you? Of course. Okay, continue. When we finished devouring the flesh of divinity, Audrey seemed to realize something, and we all saw the grand tree behind her, the tree of pure knowledge, wither and die. And then she spoke to us. "Fear not," she said, "for the Spirit of the Lord has chosen us to become the new vessels of absolute knowledge." And then she ordered us all to gather the dying fruit from the tree of knowledge, and we all ate. "That's impossible," I murmured. "A single bite would have already killed you before." "Such is the mighty protection of the Lord," Carmelia chanted. "And it is my sin that I did not get to devour more of the flesh of God. There were too many people joined, like a web of flesh, and suddenly we all heard pure and undoctored thoughts, the thoughts of our beloved, our enemies, our friends, and the Lord itself. It revealed to us that it would take Pastor Audrey to be born once more. And then... What? I pressed. I did not eat more of the flesh and blood of divinity, and I was not taken by the might of the one true truth that is all things, but I saw it happen. The rebirth of our Lord, the rebirth of the tree of knowledge. Branches sprung forth from the insides of Audrey, tearing her apart yet making her a part of a new web of thought, a new tree of knowledge, another wellspring of knowledge. Oh my God, I sighed. But I suddenly felt myself disconnected, and I could no longer hear the thoughts of the world. I had not eaten enough fruit, and I could only watch as my sisters and brothers were taken by knowledge, being born into the children of the tree. Carmelia seemed to get angrier by the second, now growling, and I only watched as their throats began to swell, filling up with knowledge and flesh. I watched them laugh, at peace, understanding the knowledge of the universe. I turned towards Audrey, now one with the tree for fruit, but her head simply smiled and said, "You are no longer welcome here, child." And then she and everyone laughed, and I ran out of the church and into the desert, ashamed. I watched as the woman began to struggle against the chains which held her arms to the table. I, for my part, stood up, preparing to leave when behind me I heard the noise of something cracking, snapping away. I turned to see that one of Carmelia's hands were free and that the other one was fighting against the weak remnants of the cuff, and seeing that, I ran to the door. It wasn't opening, and Agent Rengage checked the lock, then yelled something I will never forget. I can't open the door. It's not even locked." The sound of bone cracking and metal snapping came from behind me, and I saw Carmelia growl incoherently, saying distant phrases that I could not understand. "I understand," she murmured. "Flesh. I begin." She yelled in pain, and suddenly she fell to the floor and everything went silent. The door finally opened and Agent Rengage and her partner entered, guns at the ready. They looked horrified. I looked at the fallen body of Carmelia to see that something was growing her throat. Something round, spherical, and I saw a look of pure happiness in her eyes before she closed them for the last time. As I was escorted outside the room and into the lobby, I swore I could hear the last thoughts of Carmelia, singing in joy and freedom and something else. Something welcoming her as a child of the flesh of God. So I'm a botanist. Please don't worship a tree as God. I have a big problem. I'm concerned for my brother. I haven't been able to contact him over the past few days at all, by phone, email, or otherwise. Now, normally this itself wouldn't be worrying, but I know the password to his email account, and when I checked yesterday, the entire inbox was empty except for these weird email messages apparently sent by his hometown police department. This isn't normal. My brother is absolutely horrible when it comes to keeping up with his email. His inbox is typically a cluttered mess with hundreds of undeleted emails. This combined with a complete lack of contact is seriously starting to make me worried. I posted what the emails read below. Maybe one of you may have a better understanding of what's going on. What should I do? 7/16/2021. Notice of two residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is a notice issued to all residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina by the town council in conjunction with city officials in regards to recent rumors circulating within city limits. These rumors revolve around several tourists and residents complaining of hearing the popular children's tune Baby Shark playing in their heads despite no apparent source. This alone would not be any cause for alarm, however. Rumors are circulating that this song is connected to a shark attack that occurred last week. An adolescent male tourist had complained of hearing the first verse of the song repeatedly in his head, growing in intensity as he neared the water's edge, entering the water at the coercion of his friends. He was bitten in the leg by a great white shark and severely injured. Eyewitness reports dictate that the shark was around 5 feet in length. A fisherman caught a similar 5-foot 4-inch great white shark pup that afternoon just off of Cooper Inlet. The victim has stated that upon approaching the shore, the verse in his head intensified and changed to "run away, doot doo da doot da doot doo." And after the attack, the verse changed again to "it's the end." Town officials and local experts maintain that this attack is an isolated incident, and residents have little cause for concern. The correlation between any music and the reported attack is entirely coincidental. Beaches are to remain open for the time being, and no wide-scale alert is necessary. Residents are advised to refrain mentioning the incident to incoming tourists, and businesses are to remain open. Update number 1, 7/19/2021. Notice to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is an official update regarding our previous notice about the baby shark rumors. 3 more shark attacks have been reported over the past week, with one victim being sent to the hospital for major wounds. All of the victims are claiming to have heard the first verse of Baby Shark several days before being attacked. 2 attacks were caused by infant black-tip sharks, resulting in minor injuries, and 1 was caused by another suspected great white pup. Though this remains unconfirmed, searches by town officials and local fishermen have come up completely empty. No shark sightings have been reported since the first attack 2 days ago. Town officials have given the go-ahead to reopen beaches to the public. However, residents are advised to be wary of potential dangers to themselves and others. Tourists are to be informed of the heightened potential danger by hotel managers, and should only enter the water at their own risk. If anyone reports hearing the song Baby Shark in their head, Family members and friends are advised to keep them away from the ocean until the song fades away. And report all cases to the town officials by your local doctor. Update number 2. 7/22/2021. Notice to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is an advisory warning to all residents of Cozy Shores regarding the baby shark incidents. 10 more shark attacks have occurred, including one fatality. The victim of this attack was reported complaining hearing of the second verse of the song, Mommy Shark Doo 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 Doo, before entering the water. The victim was then attacked by an adult black-tip shark, according to eyewitnesses. Local doctors, experts, and town officials are delegating whether the change to the second verse may indicate an increase of size. Reports have come in stating that people who hear the song Baby Shark in their head are having an unnaturally strong urge to visit the beach within several days of hearing the tune. While this has not been confirmed, residents are advised to be watchful of any family members or loved ones displaying these symptoms. The beach is to be closed until further notice. Residents are advised to avoid the ocean entirely and report any person seen near the ocean to the appropriate authorities. Anyone displaying symptoms of the baby shark condition are to be taken to the St. Maria Medical Center located downtown for evaluation. Tourists are to be allowed to visit stores and other local attractions, provided they do not go to the beach. If questioned, residents are to say the beaches are closed due to rip currents. Update number 3, 7/25/2021. Emergency alert to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. There is an official warning to all residents and tourists of Cozy Shores on behalf of town officials in conjunction with the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. Anyone reporting signs of the baby shark condition is to be brought immediately to the St. Maria Medical Center downtown for evaluation and treatment. If the victim attempts to travel in the direction of the beach, they are to be stopped using any force deemed necessary. Non-essential businesses are to be closed until further notice. Food and water will be given at City Hall to anyone who needs it. Residents are advised to stay in their homes until further notice, except for vital errands or delivering a victim to the medical center. Tourists are advised to leave as soon as possible. Update number 4, 7/26/2021. Emergency alert to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is an emergency alert to all residents and tourists in Cozy Shores on behalf of town officials in conjunction with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the South Carolina National Guard. All residents are now required to stay inside their homes except for vital errands. Tourists are required to stay inside their respective hotels or current accommodations. The town of Cozy Shores is now in lockdown and official quarantine under Federal Order number 334A. Residents are strongly encouraged to comply with all CDC and National Guard regulations, which can be found in accompanying Document B. Town officials are working in conjunction with the federal government to remedy this incident as soon as possible. Any person walking towards the coastline is to be avoided at all costs, and immediately reported to the nearest National Guard personnel or authority figure. Anyone found on the beach will be dealt with using lethal force. Any sharks found on the streets are to be exterminated on site. Update number 5, 8/01/2021. Emergency alert to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is an emergency alert to all residents and tourists in Cozy Shores on behalf of town officials in conjunction with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the South Carolina National Guard. Stay inside your homes. Do not listen to the song. If anyone is humming Baby Shark, allow them to leave. It is better that way. Update number 6, 8/06/2020. Emergency alert to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. This is an emergency alert to all inhabitants of Cozy Shores on behalf of Steve Johnson, Assistant City Administrator. Do not listen to the sharks. They are not your friends. If you can, run away. Run to the interstate. The army is there. If you can't get there, stay inside. Don't look out the windows. They are hunting for us. Let's go hunt. Do. This concludes our emergency alert. Update number 7, 8/12/2020. Notice to the residents of Cozy Shores, South Carolina. The beach is now open. All residents and tourists are welcome to come enjoy the sparkling, blue-green seas and sandy shores of our beautiful town. Tourists are welcome back in town. Tourists may come into town. They must see our beautiful beaches. They must see our diverse aquatic wildlife, like sharks. They must see the sharks. They must listen to the sharks. They must meet baby shark and mommy shark and daddy shark. All residents, new goals are to bring up as many tourists into town as possible. Obedience is mandatory. Update number 8. It's the end. Do. I cannot disclose my name, age, or gender, as it will only bring harm to me once again. Just my whereabouts being disclosed might prove to be the end of my very being. However, what I can disclose is one thing. If you see a red mirror, run. I don't care if you are alone, with a group of people, or even in the toilet. As soon as you see it, run. You will know by its appearance. The frame of the mirror is a crimson red, tinted with a smear of brown on the far corners. The patterns, as far as we humans can comprehend, is and isn't there. It's hard to explain. The longer you stare at the patterns, the more vivid they become, yet one glance away and they were never there. The glass itself is another thing, though. The glass isn't red, or shattered, or inscribed with magical cursed writing as you would imagine. No, it's gone. There is not a single piece of glass to be seen within the frame. I, once again, cannot disclose too much, but there is a theory that it absorbs all light that shines upon it. A self-made theory, of course. Despite the urge to test this theory, I am too afraid. No, there is no word within the dictionary to fully allow others to comprehend my fear. What's the big deal? It just absorbs light and it is red. Big deal. This may be your thoughts as you read this. It isn't the mirror itself that causes such distress towards me and concern for my being. No. Just as you don't fear darkness itself, but rather what lurks within the dark, I too fear what lurks within the mirror. It first appeared to me as I was going to the local shop. Just there, floating. Despite it obviously being right in front of me, others on the sidewalk were not able to see it. It only appeared to me. Baffled by this sudden appearance, I could only assume that it was a prank. Surely, there is no possible way in which a mirror could appear out of thin air. I was not going mad. I am not going mad. Not mad. No. As I began to question my sanity, I caught a glimpse of it. Lurking behind the black singularity of darkness was this creature. No, it definitely wasn't just a creature. It had no color, yet I could see it. It wasn't moving, yet I felt it draw near. It didn't speak to me, yet I felt this connection. Not a positive connection. No, not at all. It wasn't a divine connection either, between a deity and man, nor a mother and a child. It was the relationship between a predator and its prey. Hunger. It spoke. Hunger. I hunger. As it, what I can only assume it was doing, roared and proclaimed its hunger. I turned tail and ran until I passed out. I wasn't aware of where I was going, but I ran for what I can assume was for a day. As it was dark now, I fell onto my bottom to rest. This, however, was short-lived. Out of the dark, slowly approaching were, at first, 2 lines of crimson red. 4 lines of crimson red. I cannot continue the story as I'm afraid it might find a way to find me using this. No, it may already know. Surely not. Yes, it might. This red mirror has driven me mad. I can't sleep well, eat well. I can barely do anything normally. I hallucinate the mirror approaching me as I go about my day. I'm not going mad. No. Surely not. No. Please, if you see it, or it chooses you, run. Run. I don't care where you are. Run. If it approaches you, please run. Her footsteps marked the coarse path leading up to a small, roughed-up house at the edge of the world. It was an island in a sea of brown and green, a fingertip of civilization pushed up against the wilderness that lay beyond the guarded tree line. She gripped the straps of her hiking pack as she brushed her sandy brown hair aside and stepped towards the building. Her auburn eyes glanced around at her surroundings before resting on a dark-haired figure sitting on a small stony ledge a few strides from the doorway. Dry grass crumpled underneath the girl's shoes as she approached. "Hey, Eli." Noe looked up and smiled, a cigarette smoldering between their fingers. "Hey." She gave them a quick nod before they both turned away and stepped up to the wooden door that made the main entrance to the shelter. Putting her hands against the steel crash bar that felt 100 years old, she pushed. The chalk-colored walls were covered with scratched-up posters and edgy graffiti. 2 old leather couches pushed against opposite corners of the room. There was a dim hallway leading into the rest of the shelter on the left wall. A small table with half-full bottles stood at the center of the room. One of them tipped over and rolling precariously towards the edge of the table as the remainder of its contents dripped onto the floor. "Cave Town" blasted softly from a speaker in the crowd of glass. On the couch next to Eli was a chocolate-haired girl in a red sweater trying to put her contacts on. A pair of twin siblings on the couch opposite her, annoying each other while they played their Switch. A boy in a gray hoodie was laying on the floor next to the table. "Oh, look who's finally here," Kim said. Eli smirked and threw her pack onto the couch next to her, startling the other girl as she was about to put in her contact lenses. "Fuck you too," Eli replied. "Sup, Ash?" The half-drunk boy on the floor simply nodded in response, met with a short chuckle from her. She scanned the familiar room, this residence, which she imagined to be someone's abandoned property that they had taken for themselves, was their own little outing. An idyllic escape from the smoke, noise, dirt, and concrete of that damned city. This was a place where they could finally rest. However, its most exciting attribute was that it was near the Silent Patch Woods where strange creatures were rumored to roam. The perfect place for young amateur cryptozoologists and ghost hunters to get themselves in trouble. Her eyes met the wall next to the twins. Pasted there was a chart with drawings of bizarre entities scattered all over it. A poster of a UFO with "I want to believe" written below. And another marked with "Save the Cryptids." It all made her chuckle fondly. Noi was always the most eccentric of the group when it came to the supernatural. Footsteps thudded on the gray linoleum floor coming down from the hallway, and a tall 19-year-old peeked into the room with a cup of iced tea in hand. He scanned the room and smiled. "Good to see everyone's already here." He greeted Eli with a pat on the head, sitting on the edge of the couch as he checked up on how she was doing. Micah was a true dad friend, which was fitting being that he was also the most senior member of the group. After a short conversation and a very Tad-like admonishment of Z and Hall's arguing, He was back down the hallway to get more drinks. The brown-haired girl sighed and shuffled off her jacket. Without a word, she stood up and walked over to the door again, pulling it open and meeting the world outside. Noe turned and smiled as she approached and sat down, cigarette in hand. Got an extra? They were smoking on a small rock at the edge of the world. Noe tore the cigarette from their lips, watching it burn into a stub in their fingers, and smothered it against the rough surface they sat on. An exhale, the smell of sulfur and nicotine. Their short black hair swished as they turned to face Eli. Like a raven's hair, she thought. Excited? Sorta. I know you are. Noe chuckled. Tonight's gonna be the night. I can feel it, they said. Sure you do. Eli grinned, receiving a half-annoyed punch to the shoulder in response. She nearly laughed out the smoke in her lungs. You say that and you'll be clinging to my shoulder by midnight. She rolled her eyes. $10. Deal. Noe smiled. Eli's phone flashed 10:02 in bold white letters, piercing through the darkness of the living room. Her other hand gripped a flashlight. Noe was at the front of the group next to Micah, going on and on about the guidelines, what to do, what not to do, how to prevent getting lost, and other things along that same line. Small containers to collect samples, gloves, a magnifying glass, a flashlight, a compass, and a pair of binoculars made up the group's equipment. Their phones would be their cameras and audio recorders, Noe's in particular acting as their logbook, to protect themselves from bandits, or whatever else they might find out in the verdant dark. They also carried retractable batons and pocket knives. They were on the hunt. The door behind them shut with a firm thud. Eli stuffed her phone into her jacket, the grip around her flashlight tightening. A soft, chilly breeze blew across the grass and made her shiver, the only other sound being dirt crushed under the rubber heel of their sneakers, as the group walked towards the black wall of trees. There was a full moon shining in the sky like a dim lantern guiding them forward in a pitch-black cave, enabling them to make their way across the field without tripping or stepping on a snake. On the other side of the building was a floodlight soaking its portion of the field in a massive wave of light, acting as a visual guide once they gathered enough evidence and needed to return. Eli stared down at the dimly lit ground, one sneaker in front of the other, before the footsteps around her stopped. Looking up, she realized they were already at the forest border. The trees looked so much bigger in the dark. The girl shuddered as she turned her flashlight on like the rest of the group did. There was a dreadful pit in her stomach, like she was entering the threshold of something horrible with no coming back. The same feeling as entering the operating room for surgery, or about to confess to a crime in front of one's parents. She felt like she was trespassing on a forbidden or sacred area, breaking into an abandoned church and trampling on its nave. The branches of the foreboding oak trees that arched overhead being the rib vaults of these hollowed halls. A friendly hand nudged her. Eli, you're with me. Z and Hal, go with Micah. Kim and Ash, you know what to do. Shit. She forgot. We're splitting up. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness, shining on old tree trunks and the thick undergrowth of the woodland depths. Noe was already starting to walk ahead of her, their own flashlight dancing with hers. With a sigh, she took a step forward. The only sounds this deep into the forest were the shifting of their sneakers through the forest floor, the gentle shake of the night wind through the tree leaves, and the distant chirping and hooting of unseen birds. Two teenagers, one with short black hair and long brown hair, walked through the pitch-black depths. Eli shivered. Sometimes she saw what looked like a shadowy figure staring from behind the thick trees, but shining her flashlight on it, revealed to be a kind of bush or branch. but that feeling of unease never subsided, especially now that the pair were so far from the rest of the group. Noise stopped dead in their tracks, causing Eli to nearly slam right into them. What's the holdup? Holy shit, I think I found something. Their voice nearly wavered by the end of the sentence. A mixture of fear and excitement. Eli felt her stomach drop as her gaze followed theirs. Noise slowly stepped forward, keeping their flashlight dead ahead onto the tree in front of them. Jutting out of it was a large gray claw like an oversized thorn, shining with keratin, with small barbs running along its length on both sides. It was as if it had been smashed into the tree like a pickaxe and ripped out forcefully. Following its angles was a gash in the tree trunk that exposed the raw heartwood beneath, the shriveled pieces of bark rotting around the roots planted in the ground. Oh my fucking god, Eli sputtered. Keep your light on it. She did as they asked, illuminating the wounded plant as Noi fumbled around to put their glove on. They slowly approached the tree, stepping on the ancient roots and tightly gripping the claw's base. One forceful pull freed the alien talon from its prison of wood with a small pop noise. The pair stared in shock at him. Its features reminded her of those shark teeth that wildlife experts would wave around on TV all the time, or a fossilized tooth in a dinosaur documentary, but she was sure it didn't belong to either of those. Looks like it's been here for a few weeks. That's my guess, at least. That doesn't make this any less creepy. Noi looked up at her, brown eyes peering from under her black cap. They slowly chuckled in disbelief. I told you tonight was the night. They turned to look at the tree again, the beam of their light dancing across the forest floor for a moment as they did. Noi stuffed the claw into her pack before having a double take. Something in the corner of their eye. Their flashlight flicked from the dark brown to the earth again, and their eyes widened into saucers. Holy fuck. Eli walked over to look. What is it? Imprinted into the soil was a set of massive footprints leading into the darkness beyond. Noi looked back with a dumbfounded smile. Eli didn't even resist when they grabbed her wrist and pulled her further into the dense woodland, knowing there would be no stopping her excited companion with such a discovery. It was better to go in together rather than risk Noi prance around giddily in the area farthest from civilization that they had ever known without being supervised. The brown-haired girl sighed and let her legs carry her forward. If we get eaten alive by Bigfoot out here, it'll be your fault. Don't worry, Bigfoot doesn't have claws like that. She scoffed. Noi's capacity for humor in the situation was borderline annoying. I'm keeping my $10, by the way, came her reply. The pair walked slowly, following the trail of strange footprints on the ground. It didn't look like any animal footprints Eli was familiar with. Certainly not a wolf's or bear's, judging from the prolonged shape. Her companion took a photo of the tracks on their phone, zooming in on the image and seemingly pondering over it for a few moments. Her flashlight stayed trained on the ground, illuminating the edges of the fresh tracks. It looks like a fly's footsteps. A fly's? Yeah, or something like that. How do you know? A few months ago, Mom baked cupcakes for me and a fly walked all over it while it was cooling. This looks kinda similar. So, Mothman? Eli half-jokingly suggested. Noi chuckled. I don't think the Mothman has giant insect legs. The conversation helped soothe her nerves as the two continued their way through the thick undergrowth. A loose bush or a root brushing against her calf occasionally startled her, and her hands still nervously twitched the flashlight around to invisible shadows in the dark. But at least she wasn't alone, and at least it wasn't too quiet. Eli's feet were starting to burn, the sneakers on them more suitable to the streets of the inner cities she lived in rather than the great outdoors. She reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone, giving a quick press to the side button. 12:37 a.m. They had been walking for almost 2 hours now. She reached forward to give a tap to Noi's shoulders and ask if they could have a break. But as she did, they stopped dead in their tracks again and threw an arm back, colliding with her own and nearly making her smack herself in the face. "Hey, next time watch where... Look." Eli stepped to the side, a slightly annoyed expression on her face as she peered over. What she saw made her heart sink into her stomach. Her hand trembled and nearly dropped the flashlight. The tracks ended at the foot of the tree. One of its branches had been violently ripped off. There was a strange dark-colored resin splattered on the trunk, which shined as the light passed over them. "We should get a sample of that." "I'll take care of it," Eli replied. The girl took a small glass vial out and stepped up to the tree, lining up the rim with the resin. It was a vicious mix of black and dark red, taking a few hard shakes to get it to the bottom of the container. Even then, it was too little to be of much use, so she decided to take a little more. She stepped forward, getting a closer look at the trunk. Something snagged on her shin and snapped. "Eli, look out!" She turned, hearing something swish from the branches. A gray blur, then cold. Her eyes slowly opened, taking in the world above. A pitch-black mass of branches and leaves with a few specks of moonlight punching through. She blinked. It felt like her head had been smashed with a sledgehammer, the voices in her brain swirling around like a whirlpool. It hurt like hell to even think. Strangely, her head and shoulders were resting on something warm, although her elbows were dug into the dirt. Fighting through the terrible throbbing, she leaned forward ever so slightly and attempted to view her surroundings. "Oh my God." Eli's thoughts screamed through the pain. "Oh my God." It looked like a branch at first, but hanging from the top of a nearby tree was, unmistakably, an angular mantis-like limb serrated with black barbed claws. She squinted. There were 2 of them, hanging down from a long branch, leading up to an alien mouth of knife-like teeth that vaguely dripped from some sort of shiny liquid. Attached to a gray bug-like body was a plated exoskeleton glinting in the moonlight. 2 hidden arms tightly gripped the branch it was perched on top of. 4 hairy legs ended in padded and thorned feet, which buried themselves into the other branches and stabilized the creature. Eli's eyes welled up with tears as her blood went ice cold. The monstrous entity turned and stared at the tree next to it with 2 soulless pit-like eyes, and reached out with a long, vaguely humanoid arm. The ash-gray skin of its hands were stretched like saran wrap over its decrepit bones and joints, its inhumanly long arms snaking over and gripping the branch of a nearby tree. In the blink of an eye, the creature had jumped onto the branch. Eli wanted to scream, but a firm hand clamped over her mouth. Her eyes met Noi's as she looked up and realized that she was lying in their lap. They put a trembling finger to their lips, their eyes welling up. The 2 stayed there in the darkness for what seemed like an eternity, their black jackets draped over them as camouflage. The brown-haired girl breathed into her friend's palm and clamped her eyes shut, trying to calm herself. Her lower leg dug uncomfortably into the thick roots of the tree they were next to. The moist soil stained her bare arms. God, her head hurt. 3 beams of light cut through the dark from a distance, causing the pair to snap their heads in the direction of the radiance. 3 flashlights glowed in the distance, steadily approaching the pair. Eli's mouth filled with dread as she realized that they were walking right into the path of that horrible monster, and nudged Noi's leg sharply with her elbow. They glared back and shook their head. She nudged them harder. Noi wavered, then slowly nodded in agreement. They wouldn't just let them take their friends. The alien creature slowly turned its head in the same direction, the joints of its neck giving a dreadful crack. It stared at the incoming flashlights. its gaping mouth opening like a trap door. Two teens, one with black hair and one with brown, carefully stood up next to the tree behind it, knees bent. The creature prepared to sprint forward, right at their three friends. One of them breathed in. "Hey!" Noe cried. Beam launched from her hand and bathed the creature in light, illuminating its dreadful features. The monster turned and flew forward with an ear-piercing screech. Noe dropped the flashlight and ducked to the side, immediately helped up by Eli as the creature crashed into the tree and stunned itself. The two began sprinting as fast as they could into the pitch-black depths of the forest, their legs burning with pain as they passed tree after tree, their own tears streaming behind them and dribbling on their clothes. Although the shouts of their friends pursued them some distance behind, they had no choice but to run until their muscles felt like they would tear themselves off at any moment. Further and further into the darkness, their panting became strained and heavy, taking in desperate breaths of humid air with flushing faces. Eli's heart was a war drum thumping in her chest, which itself felt like it was on fire. "Wait! Eli! Stop!" Noe jumped forward and wrapped their arms around her waist in a futile attempt to stop her. Her legs twisted, stumbling over her friend's arms. The earth disappeared under her feet. The pair came tumbling forward, both screaming in terror as the darkness enveloped them in a prison of dirt and wood. They fell down into the earth. Her eyelids parted. Her cheek burned. It smelled like iron. Eli felt at her head, picking a twig from her hair and wiping something wet from her face. She looked down at her stained palm. Blood. Her breathing was surprisingly steady despite the bleeding and the shock of the fall. Her gaze turned forward. Lying a few feet in front of her was Noe, groaning quietly. She crawled over on all fours and shook them gently. "Hey, Noe, wake up." It took a few firm shakes, but their eyes eventually shot open. They groaned and rubbed their head. "Where are we?" Eli looked up, taking in their surroundings. "I don't know." The landscape around them seemed almost like another planet. In front of them was a foreboding giant of a tree, its long canopy stretching out like the head of an overgrown mushroom. Its leaves had a crimson touch to them, caused by some sort of strange spore-like growth lined along its branches, and its broad trunk and roots looked as if they had been there for thousands of years. No other tree stood near, the ones nearest to it looking frail and withered, like it was sucking out the nutrients from them. It stood there in the ethereal moonlight, something between God and a serial killer. "Holy shit," Noe uttered. Eli turned, seeing them right next to her, staring at the same tree. All thoughts of the creature temporarily went away as they cautiously approached it. "My fucking God." Noe's voice cracked and went out by the end of their sentence. Eli retched, nearly throwing up right then and there. A torn-apart, dismembered body lay at the base of the tree. Pieces of withered limbs and hunting jackets scattered around a rotting case of bones and organs. The same growths that lined the branches of the tree filled the empty eye sockets and spaces between the ribs. A pale hand lay on one of the roots. It wasn't just a single human body either. Dozens, perhaps dozens of bones lay scattered around the tree. Remnants of the forest residents laid down like some unholy shrine. Bile rose to her throat. She leaned over to the side and hurled onto the ground. The realization hit the two like a brick. The crimson growths lining the branches of the tree were pulsing. They were eggs. Something rustled the forest floor leaves behind them. They turned, expecting a massive insectoid limb with razor-sharp claws to lash out and rip them apart instantly. Instead, they saw a boy in a gray hoodie stumbling down the cliff they had fallen from, scurrying out of the darkness with eyes wide as saucers. He looked as if he had just witnessed a murder. "Ash, are you all right?" Noi called. Yeah, are you? Kind of. Where are the others? Not far behind. They're trying to fight off that thing. What's that thing behind you? Eli and Noi looked at each other, then to Ash. Eggs. What? Eli walked over, wiping her mouth. Ash, we need to burn this fucking thing to the ground. Otherwise, this whole goddamn forest will be infested with those things. He looked around, trying to think of something. I have an aerosol can. You got a lighter? Eli thought for a moment, before grabbing her jacket and shuffling through it. Must be in here somewhere. Her memory stayed true. The cold metal of her Zippo lighter brushing up against her hand like ice. She pulled out from the depths of her jacket as Ash searched through his own bag for his spray can. A screech followed by a chorus of shouts echoed in the distance. Shit, they're nearby. Noi sputtered. Hold on, Ash replied. He continued to shift through his bag, the two others looking around with worried glances as those alien screams grew louder and louder. 4 human voices became audible. With them came the sound of bushes shaking and branches rattling. Ash! Hold on! They heard Micah cry out from the distance. Finally, Ash wrenched the can out from his backpack, giving it a strong shake. Now light it! Another screech came from down the hill behind them. Eli took a deep breath and flicked the wheel. No flame. She flicked it again. Nothing. Come on! Noi shouted. A screech came from the cliff behind them. Eli's hands trembled as she flicked the wheel one more time. The air in front of her immediately burst into a fiery wind, bathing the tree trunk in flame. She could barely hear the aerosol can over the sound of the burning gas, which ignited the eggs inside the corpse and on the branches of the tree. Nor could she hear the sound of something bounding across the ground behind her. The wind was knocked out of her as she fell to the side with Ash clutching her stomach. Her mouth opened to scream as the creature grabbed her throat with its bony hands and reached desperately across the ground for something to defend herself with. The inferno beside her caused sweat to drip onto her eyes and blind her. She held on to something hot and wooden as the creature drew her toward its dreadful mouth that smelled like rotten flesh, lined with knife-like teeth that could bite a cow in half. It opened wide to swallow her whole, prompting her to thrust the burning branch she held straight into its gaping jaws. It roared with excruciating pain, amplified by noise smashing it on the leg with their baton from behind. Dropping her onto the ground, the cryptid bounded off into the darkness like a massive grasshopper, tearing branches from trees in its wake. Eli lied on the soil, both of her hands singed and her cheek still bleeding. A mix of footsteps resounded nearby as the ancient tree continued to disintegrate in a massive pillar of fire. Adrenaline still pumped through her veins and stress still crowded her mind, but her body was a broken machine that could continue no longer. Her eyes began to shut. Right before she passed out, someone with short black hair lifted her onto their shoulders. The two stared at the tree line in the distance, the warm breeze blowing through their hair. Eli's fingers traced the surface of the ledge they sat on, the same one that sat on 2 days ago. Noi looked at her. Your cheek doing all right? Yeah. She traced the band-aid, covering the cut. There was another one patching the wound she received from the cinder block trap that first knocked her out. My legs still hurt like hell, though, she continued. Miraculously, all 7 of them had come back alive from the expedition, wounded to various degrees but alive. Plus, most of them also managed to bring back evidence of the creature's existence, which would definitely get them a lot of money from other curious investigators once they'd returned to the city. Same here. At least the others are doing fine. Micah's gash is starting to heal. Can't wait to come back home and have to explain to my mom how I got so messed up. Noi snickered. Good luck. You'll need it. There was a short silence as the morning birds chirped from afar. You owe me $10 now, by the way. Eli scoffed. I was asleep. Unfair. Rules are rules. She smiled, her gaze fixed once more at the trees across the field. She was sure of it. There was far more lurking in the depths of that ancient forest than what they encountered that night. Although they managed to destroy the eggs, the beast itself was still out there, waiting for them. For now, though, she laid back on the rock and relaxed. They could return to the forest depths another time.